What's up, fellow coders? Welcome to another exciting adventure in quick tech tutorials. We'll make it quick. All right, welcome back, everybody. So today I'm going to go over a tutorial on the UIScrollView, only this time it's going to go in the horizontal direction. And again, this tutorial will be all about AutoLayout and how to accomplish the horizontal paging from the UIScrollView. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm here at my storyboard, and the first thing that I'm going to do is just come over here. I'm going to drag a scroll view onto my main view controller, and from here I'm going to center it horizontally, equal widths, equal heights, add those constraints, then I'll center it vertically. I'll give us a new color scheme so we can at least see the scroll view when we come up in our emulator. There, I'll go ahead and update the screen. Really quick, let's do the width at, let's go with 95%, why not? And the height will also go with 95%. Let's go with 90% on that. So I have a scroll view, just pretty much laid it out, centered onto my main view controller. And from here, I am simply going to drag on a UI view. I'm going to make that UI view. I'm just going to make the aspect ratio 1:1. Nothing saying you have to do this, just convenience. I just like the look of it. I'm going to put on a new label. This is my view 1, and I will change the color of this to something horrifically ugly so we can see it later on. Now, what I'm going to do to make sure that this scrolls horizontally is I'm going to first make sure that I have equal widths, equal heights, and I'm also going to center it vertically. I'm going to go ahead and add those constraints. We get a whole bunch of nastiness here, and that's fine. So I have the equal widths, equal height. This will go into the scroll view centered. And the one thing I need to do on this very first UI view is I need to give it a leading constraint as well. Now I'm going to take that leading constraint and make sure that I set that to 0. So all I've done so far is put on a single UI view onto a scroll view. And let's go ahead and run this. Make sure we have what we would expect to have at this point. And as you can see, when the emulator starts up, I have that single view, nothing scrolling, and that's fine. We haven't completed everything yet, but we have the initial layout of our application for paging in place. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag another view on here, and I'm just going to make this a 1:1 ratio. Again, nothing saying you have to do that. It's just something I do to keep things kind of looking the way I would expect. Here, I'm going to do another hideous color, whatever. I will give this a label of view 2. Now, for this view, I'm going to do the exact same thing that I did previously, is giving it the center vertical, equal widths, equal heights, and I'm going to go ahead and add those constraints. Now, with this view, I need to do a couple of other constraints on this to make sure that we get our scrolling correct. And the first thing that I need to do is I need to line this up with a leading constraint. And the leading constraint needs to go to the trailing of view 1. And then I need to give it a trailing constraint to its super view. So let's go ahead and look and see what we just did with this. First off, I'm going to reverse these just so they read the same way I would say them. So view 2's trailing constraint is going to be equal to the super view trailing, and you can see that it gave it this default of -146, and that's just because of the placement in storyboard. We'll go ahead and set that to 0. Now the next one that we have is, I'm going to reverse, or I'll leave these. View 2 leading is equal to view 1 leading. That's not what we want. What we want is to make sure it goes to the trailing. So the view 2 leading goes to the view 1 trailing from here to here. And that constraint is at 0. So let's go ahead and run that and see what we get. And so now you can see that I'm getting that scroll. And let's go ahead and see what that looks like and explain the concepts we've gone over so far. Okay, let's take a look and see what we've done so far. First, we added our view onto a scroll view. We centered it vertically, gave it equal widths, equal heights, and that essentially gave us our first view that we saw with no scrolling effect. We also gave it the leading constraint to make sure that it lined up in our viewable area so we could see it. Then we brought in a second view and we did the exact same thing. We aligned it vertically, gave it equal widths, gave it equal heights. This time, however, we went ahead and made our leading constraint to the trailing of our first view. And the trailing constraint for that second view was to the trailing edge of the scroll view. Same exact principle when we brought in our third view. We brought that in and we did the exact same alignment. Alignment vertical, equal widths, equal heights. And this time we gave it the leading constraint to the trailing edge of our second view, and we gave it a trailing constraint to the trailing edge of our scroll view, which gave us this linked list concept for our paging. Okay, so basically when you're looking at this stuff, this more or less is going to be considered something like a linked list, right? So each one of these views would represent a node in your linked list. I'm just going to kind of drive the point home, I'm going to add on one more view. Again, I'm just making this a 1-to-1 ratio just so everything is a square on there. I will give this a label of view 3. I will make this another grotesquely hideous color so we can all see it. And here, I'm just lining these up a little bit like this so I can kind of see view 1, view 2, view 3, and how they're kind of lined up in a linked list concept. From here, again, I'm going to go to the scroll view. I'm going to center it vertically, width, height. I'm going to go ahead and add those constraints. Now, I need to make sure that my view 3's leading is going to go to my view 2 trailing. So let me put the leading in there. And then my view 3 leading is going to, or I'm sorry, my view 3 trailing is going to the super view trailing. Now, I need to be mindful that my previous view 2 trailing needs to go away. If I didn't do this, it would pretty much just overwrite the third UI view. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to nuke that. Now, again, there's some work we have to do. For the view 3 trailing, again, I'm going to reverse this just so it reads the same way I would say it. It has that -41 just because of the placement in the storyboard. I'm going to change that to 0. And for the view 2 or the view 3 leading is by default set to the view 2 leading. We want that set to the trailing. It's already at 0, so that's fine. Let's go ahead and run this. Okay, and now as you can see, I have my view 1 is blue, view 2 is red, view 3 is green, and I have the scrolling. Now the only other thing that I'm going to add in really quick, because this is how most people prefer to have their paging done, is actually enable paging on the scroll view. But that's pretty much it. You'll notice that I have these errors here. I'm going to get to these warnings in just a moment, but the error is ambiguous for the height. Now, the ambiguity here is saying that it has no idea how to scroll vertically. In this case, we don't want it to scroll vertically, but as you know, I don't like leaving errors in my storyboard. So what I'm going to do is on the very first view, I'm going to give it a, why won't I do that? Let me give it a top to container and a bottom to container. Now, can't necessarily leave that in there. It's going to get all kinds of crazy whack, and you can already see that it's giving me errors based on the fact that it's saying if you're from the top 47, you can't possibly be centered and you can't possibly have the same height. So we need to correct that. Let's go in here. We'll go to the top. First thing, we'll make that 0. And the bottom, we'll go ahead and make that 0 as well. Not that it's complaining about this, but here. And we'll go ahead and reverse just so it reads the same way we would say it. And it makes it a little bit easier to just kind of look over here and see that. Now, what we'll have left are these warnings. And what these warnings are basically saying is the size of this view isn't correct in what we've laid it out to be. So in our constraints for auto layout, we've set equal widths and equal heights to the scroll view, which clearly that doesn't pertain here, or that doesn't line up here. So that's what the warnings are about, and I'll show you why I'm doing this in a moment. But let's go ahead and let's make sure that the bottom is also removed at build time, and the top is removed at build time. And we will now run it. And you can see that I have my paging nice and clean. So really quick, I just want to show you why I leave these warnings in. So by being able to look at my storyboard, I can see the entire view here. If I want to drag something in, let's just say I want to do a segment controller, and I want to align that vertically and horizontally. Now, when I go to run this, you'll see here, now that the emulator started up, I have my segment controller inside that second view. And it was just easy for me to do with everything, you know, kind of, even though the constraints are giving me the warnings, it was easy for me to put this control or this segment view onto that second view. If I go ahead and I fix all the misplaced in here, everything's going to line up, but now I can't really see it. So if I want to go back to the second view and I want to add something in there, you know, I'm going to have to come back and manually shrink it down in, bring it in there. Let's just say I go to 100, and I can drag on, you know, whatever, and then I can fix it again. But it just depends on however you want to work. But anyways, that's why I had the warnings in there, and I just kind of left them previously so I could see them at 128 by 128. So anyways, that's all you need for using AutoLayout, and nothing but storyboard. Once again, you'll see that no code for this one, and hopefully that helps somebody out there. Again, I appreciate you stopping by. Let me know if you like the video, and again, if you like the concept of a tutorial that's 15 minutes or less, by all means subscribe, and I'll get you the content as quickly as possible. Thanks again.